let's do some philosophy of mind, my friends. What the heck is philosophy of mind? Let's connect this with what we know. Remember our Tupperware containers or our dollar store glass containers. The idea is everyone has a philosophy, and a philosophy is an answer to the following questions. What exists? How do I know it? And what should I do? Believe it or not, everyone has an answer to these questions. It's probably an answer they haven't spoken out loud ever. But, you know, we all, if we're going to act out in the world, have to have a blueprint of what the world is like and what we should do in that world. And so we all have a philosophy. And we want to, in philosophy, take this systematically. We want to take each of those questions and try to answer them and then ask why, to try to provide some solid reasons. Now, what we're going to be looking at today, philosophy of mind, is kind of sitting between two boxes. In a way, you can say that minds exist, for instance. That could be a claim about what exists. So, for instance, if you start listing all the stuff that exists and you say, well, minds exist, then that would be a metaphysical claim. And of course, if you say that minds exist, then my next question is going to be like, how do you know it? It's like, fair enough, you can say whatever you want. Like when we're going to be doing, for instance, philosophy of religion, right? You can make a metaphysical claim. You can say gods exist or something like that. And then if you say that, then of course, the next question I'm going to ask you is, how do you know, right? So like all this stuff, you can't just say it. You have to justify it. It's very, very different. Anyone can make a claim. What's hard is to argue. And by arguing, I don't just mean scream louder. I mean systematically provide logically related reasons that support the conclusion that you're putting forward, right? So suppose you say, for instance, that minds exist. We want to say, well, how do I know it? And remember, one of the answers that we had last time was, well, because science says so, right? So that was, right, let me just type that in. Because science says so was a pretty darn good answer if you know what science is, right? Provided you've unpacked what the heck science is, because science says so is a pretty good answer, because then you get to turn to the literature of the scientific research that's been conducted, and then that's going to direct you to points of observation and things to experiments to run and whatever laboratory results and all this wonderful stuff that's going to justify why you should believe in whatever's been said in the metaphysical box. But suppose someone says that minds exist. We want to wonder, this is what we're going to do today, like how much can science actually do in the way of establishing the reality of a mind, right? So for instance, when I look at you act and do stuff, I see you and I see your body, and that certainly exists. But what about your mind? Can minds be studied by science? And that's the question we're going to be asking. And the philosophy of mind questions that we'll be looking at are a kind of a subset of epistemology questions, right, about knowledge, and a subset of metaphysical questions about reality. So we're going to be concerned with reality, the reality of the mind, and knowledge. How do we know the reality of the mind? And when these questions become sophisticated enough, they become a branch of philosophy. They become philosophy of a certain thing, because there's so much specialization that happens that it becomes its own thing. Like, for instance, philosophy of technology. It turns out technology is so strange and puzzling that it's become its own thing now. We have a philosophy of technology because it's an area where philosophers start thinking about that particular subject. That's what we're going to be doing today. So we'll be asking variations on the questions about, how do I know what a mind is, or how do I know that a mind exists? What aspects of the mind can be studied by science, which can't, and so on. All right. So the most prominent metaphysical view is that what exists is only matter. This view looks perfectly sensible because it invites us to look to physics for insights into the nature of the universe. But while physics does a great job of explaining physical bodies and their motion, it has a hard time explaining minds. In fact, strictly speaking, while it seems obvious that we all have minds, minds do not figure in the physicist's list of things that are real. Philosophy of mind is preoccupied in large part with figuring out what to do about this bizarre status. If you go to the KPU bookstore and you grab a physics textbook and you look at the index at the end of names, the words, and you look for minds, you're not going to find any. It's like, well, physicists don't think minds exist, technically speaking. They think that matter exists, but what about minds? And so yet we kind of think we have minds. And so what do we do about that? And that's what philosophy of mind is. It's just thinking about this. Now, one response is to say that since minds do not figure in the physicist's list of things that are real, minds are not real. This view, which takes physics to have the final say in philosophical matters, is called physicalism. If physics says that the world is made of matter, then physicalism is synonymous with materialism, the dominant view that we've already encountered when doing metaphysics, the idea that everything is made of matter. Our main author, Frank Jackson, disagrees with the claim that the mind can be explained solely by studying matter. In order to justify his disagreement, he presents what is known as the knowledge argument. In philosophy of mind, this argument has been extremely influential. The argument focuses on a feature of the mind, namely consciousness. Consciousness is the state of being aware that begins when you wake up in the morning and that ends when you fall asleep at night. A synonym for consciousness could be awareness. Moreover, the knowledge argument focuses on a feature of consciousness, namely qualitative consciousness, or qualia. Qualia, that's a technical term from philosophy of mind, are the felt qualities of conscious experience, considered apart from any cause and effect sequence they're sandwiched in, and apart from whatever function or role that they play. You don't just respond to your environment, you're aware of it. Qualia are whatever fits the form, what it's like to, and then you fill in the blank. Examples of qualia include, but are not limited to, what it's like to have a headache, what it's like to ride a roller coaster, what it's like to get tickled, what it's like to fall in love, what it's like to remember your grandmother, what it's like to see your grandmother, what it's like to drive a car, what it's like to stare at the sun, and so on. As you can tell from that list, there's a more or less distinctive quality for every experience that we undergo. Jackson argues that qualia are undeniably real. We experience them, after all, but do not fit in a purely materialist picture of reality. To show this, he argues that there's at least one quality that one cannot learn from the vantage point of physics, namely, what it's like to see red. In debates that Jackson is involved in, that makes his view a dualist view. Dualism, from the word dual, i.e. two, is the technical term used in philosophy of mind for any view that sees reality as composed of two fundamental stuffs or substances. Usually, when you encounter the term dualism, you can safely assume that the label picks out the view that reality is made of mind and matter. So when you ask what's in the metaphysics box, you put two stuffs there. You put matter and you put mind. That would be dualism. Philosophers always prefer a view with less stuffs, so they will not switch over to dualism unless they have real reasons to. Jackson provides a reason to enlarge one's list of what counts as real. The first part of our reading, which is by Jackson, presents his argument. The second part, which is by me, by the way, presents a more accessible version that anyone can verify. For convenience, I've abridged the text and highlighted the main passages. Do read the whole text, however, and be sure to write notes in the margins as you do. You should do that on your copy of the PDF. Remember also that philosophical texts require multiple readings, and the first reading is always the scariest. It's worth it though, so be brave as you grapple with these amazing ideas. And of course, I always do the scariest reading with you. Enjoy! My friends, did you like these prefaces? Did you enjoy that? Of course, we're about to do the reading. It's not the reading itself, but did you find that helpful? Like one day, maybe this could become a textbook and I could make money as opposed to giving it out for free, right? But I'm really trying to make sure that you've got all the tools to succeed. Of course, we haven't encountered the argument yet, but then if you reread it again, because rereads are important after the text, everything will fall into place even more. Cool. All right. So let's do this. This is the reading that we'll look at. We're going to have two parts. The first part's going to be by Frank Jackson. He's an Australian philosopher. He's still around. And the second part, so this is going to be just 2 pages. And then the second part's going to be by me. He's this Canadian philosopher. I think I know him. All right, let's do this. Imagine the following. A person named Mary is confined to a black and white room, is educated through black and white books, and through lectures relayed on black and white television. In this way, she learns everything there is to know about the physical nature of the world. She knows all the physical facts about us and our environment in a wide sense of physical, which includes everything in completed physics, chemistry, and neurophysiology, and all there is to know about the causal and relational facts consequent upon all this, including, of course, functional roles. If physicalism is true, she knows all there is to know. So now you know what physicalism, I talked about it, right? The idea that physics has the full story. So if physicalism is true, then she knows all there is to know. For to suppose otherwise is to suppose that there is more to know than every physical fact. And that is just what physicalism denies. Physicalism is not the non-controversial thesis that the actual world is largely physical, but the challenging thesis that it is entirely physical. It seems, however, that Mary does not know all there is to know. For when she's let out of the black and white room or given a color television, she will learn what it's like to see something red, say. This is rightly described as learning. She will not say, oh, huh. Hence, physicalism is false. This is called the knowledge argument against physicalism in one of its manifestations. The whole thrust of the knowledge argument is that Mary, before her release, does not know everything there is to know about brain states and their properties because she does not know about a certain qualia associated with them. What is complete, according to the argument, is her knowledge of matters physical. A convenient and accurate way of displaying the argument is, premise 1, Mary, before her release, knows everything physical there is to know about other people. Premise 2, Mary, before her release, does not know everything there is to know about other people because she learns something about them on her release. Therefore, conclusion 3 is conclusion. There are truths about other people and herself which escape the physicalist theory. What is immediately to the point is not the kind, manner, or type of knowledge Mary has, but what she knows. What she knows beforehand is, according to physicalism, everything physical there is to know. But is it everything there is to know? That's the crucial question. I grant that I have no proof that Mary acquires on her release, as well as abilities, factual knowledge about the experiences of others. My claim is that the knowledge argument is a valid argument from highly plausible, though admittedly not demonstrable, premises to the conclusion that physicalism is false. And that, after all, is about as good an objection as one could expect in this area of philosophy. And my friends, notice this is this excerpt I've given you from this paper. It's 2 pages. The actual paper itself is also very short. It's just 4 pages long. So you look here, page 291 to 290, whatever it is there, right? The actual paper, this is a classic paper in philosophy, just 4 pages long. I've made it even shorter. This paper is one of the most influential papers in philosophy of mind. This argument that it presents over here is called the knowledge argument. So everything you have over here, that's the knowledge argument. And this has triggered a huge amount of philosophical activity. The paper is 4 pages long, but there are thousands and thousands and thousands of pages that have been written about it. In fact, I wrote a whole book on it. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to read you an excerpt from a talk that I gave a couple years ago about this very subject. So now we're going to move on to the second part of our reading. Notice Frank Jackson's paper is called What Mary Didn't Know, and it talks about the knowledge argument. My paper is called The Ordinary Knowledge Argument. I will be talking today about the limits of cognitive science. I won't be talking about shortcomings that could perhaps be remedied with, say, more time, resources, or ingenuity. Rather, I will be concerned with limitations that are baked into the very enterprise. The main blind spot, I will argue, is consciousness. Cognitive science has experienced significant growth, so why should one consider consciousness elusive, or at any rate more problematic than other objects of scientific study? In the philosophy of mind literature, there are many thought experiments and arguments that aim to establish that at least some aspects of consciousness cannot be captured by regular scientific explanation. The most memorable is Frank Jackson's knowledge argument, which you've just been exposed to. Jackson argues that if a neuroscientist named Mary were to be raised in a black and white environment from birth and taught everything about vision and color science, her extensive knowledge would still not enable her to know, in advance of a genuine encounter, what it's like to see red. She can learn much about that color in her monochrome setting. But even with access to a completed neuroscience, she will appreciate the experiential quality of red only upon her release. I'm a big fan of this argument. Jackson's scenario, however, calls for some science fiction and gives me pause. For one thing, doctoring a black and white environment is admittedly just an idealization. For instance, if one worries that Mary might experience red by seeing her blood, one can alter the story so that she wears special goggles, color-negating goggles, and so on. Alas, these case-by-case fixes make the starting scenario far-fetched. More problematically, the story requires Mary to be maximally informed, but no single human can be maximally informed about any science, let alone all the sciences needed to exhaustively comprehend color vision. As a result of these outlandish assumptions, there will always be those, like Dan Dennett, for instance, who suspect that the knowledge argument's conclusion is dubious. That's a shame, since in principle, the qualitative dimension of consciousness should be something that we're all familiar with. I therefore want to avoid speculative detours and instead articulate the basic philosophic worry using only ordinary premises. With that orientation and caveat in mind, let me start with two premises which I trust everyone will accept. First premise, humans are capable of having orgasms. We can add to this another uncontroversial claim, namely that humans are capable of using language. Putting aside science fiction, an acknowledgement of these two claims generates a problem. Let me outline how. The human experience of orgasms and the human use of language both unfold in time. So there had to be a time when both were absent from one's cognitive life. One consequence of this unfolding in time is that most of us learned the word orgasm before we actually experienced one. The usual developmental timeline then seems to have three distinct segments. First, there was a period when one did not have any orgasm and did not even know the word for that. Next in line was a period when one generally knew the word but still had not undergone the particular experience that it picks out. Finally, there came a time when one underwent one's first orgasm, thereby augmenting one's earlier mastery of the relevant bit of language with a first-hand experience. So here you have that segmented timeline, A, B, and C. I'm not concerned with how long each segment of this timeline lasted, but only with the possibility that events can unfold in that order. Total ignorance, A, followed by hearsay, B, and finally, first-hand appreciation, C. Some individual lives no doubt unfold differently. One could, for instance, experience an orgasm before learning the word for that. Nevertheless, given the arguably standard sequence of events just outlined, the second segment becomes philosophically interesting. There was presumably a time in one's life when, despite never having had an orgasm, one knew how to deploy the word in appropriate contexts, using it grammatically in conversations and so on. This is segment B in the illustration above. In other words, passing the Turing test for robotic mimicry in front of your peers, we faked it until we made it. Now suppose that in a bid to improve one's linguistic performance, one asked a more experienced friend to describe in more detail what it's like to have an orgasm. A person in the know might give the following answer. You become all warm, it tingles, you momentarily forget where you are, your body stiffens, it's like the feeling of release that you get in a hot shower after a hard workout, and so on. Such replies can vary, but they all essentially try to reason by analogy. One takes a qualitative feel and attempts to convey the quality in question by appealing to similar qualitative feels. You will notice that this communicative strategy is premised on two assumptions. First, it's assumed that the descriptions each pick out experiences that the question asker has already undergone. Otherwise, these descriptions will in turn be unknown and thus compound the starting problem by leading to a regress. If one has never felt a tingling sensation, that analogy will not be very informative. Second, it's assumed that experience is sum, such that many conjoined descriptions can shed light on a single qualitative experience. An orgasm is a unitary experience, but we deploy a battery of adjectives to describe it. Our everyday talk nevertheless makes it seem that if one is able to analyze the feeling of an orgasm as the feeling of heat, say, the feeling of tingling, and the feeling of slight dizziness, say, one can simply add a plus sign between those parts to obtain the sum. This, however, is wildly implausible. I might say in an ordinary conversation that wasabi is like tasting hot sauce while sneezing. However, someone who tries to recreate that experience by sipping on Tabasco sauce while blowing their nose will not succeed in producing the taste of wasabi. The same goes for orgasms, which, thankfully, cannot be produced by jointly doctoring sensations of heat, tingling, and slight dizziness. This fact alone should cast doubt on the ability of language to do the referential work required. This dubious tally and threat of regress notwithstanding, what matters for my purpose is that a word is explained with still more words. This attempt to explain a word with words may look circular, but the truth is that a large enough circle can achieve wonders. A dictionary, for example, does just that. Yet without an appreciation of what at least some of the words mean, the trip through the dictionary would amount to a merry-go-round, passing endlessly from one meaningless symbol or symbol string, the words used to define one another, since those words in turn need to be defined, never coming to a halt on what anything meant. If a network of word-to-word relations is sufficiently large and sufficiently systematic, it can provide knowledge, albeit only knowledge of the sort that the British philosopher Bertrand Russell called knowledge by description. What is missing, ostensibly, is knowledge by acquaintance. Now that I've introduced this important analytical distinction, imagine that the person wishing to know more about orgasms decided to learn all the knowledge by description that one can possibly acquire about that subject. Since people can write down their first-person reports, such an armchair student of orgasms would have access to texts aiming to be maximally descriptive, like something written by a trained phenomenologist, as well as texts aiming to be maximally evocative, like something composed by a poet or a romance novelist. In addition, one could read biology textbooks, watch video footage of people undergoing the experience, and whatever else isn't an orgasm itself. The question is, could such theoretical learning, pushed to its maximum, ever allow one to know what it's like to have an orgasm? To gauge the likelihood of this, imagine that one's high school friend returned from a long reading session at the library to boast that he or she knew, without ever having one, what it feels like to have an orgasm. How seriously would we take that claim to knowledge? Surely most of us would scoff at such a boast. Recall that, unlike a colorblind neuroscientist, most of us occupied this position at some point. There was presumably a period in one's lifetime when, despite never having had an orgasm, one knew the word. Yet when our friends confessed that they had recently felt something extraordinary, few of us turned to a study of books in order to fill this intriguing gap in our knowledge. The shorter route of first-hand experience seemed, by comparison, much more fun. So when one finally underwent the experience, did one learn something conveyed exclusively by that experience? I surmise that each of us privately thought, so that's what an orgasm feels like. Only subsequent philosophical schooling can make one hesitant about the genuine novelty of this experience. And only philosophical schooling could make one take seriously the suggestion that ignorance about a conscious experience can always be remedied with more book learning. The scientific knowledge housed in a library is not useless, but when it comes to consciousness, it ostensibly leaves something out. Technological improvements can give us better brain scans, finer-grained behavioral descriptions, and maybe even sharper verbal reports. But if the present considerations are correct, there are principled reasons why such scientific improvements will fall short of conveying what a given conscious episode feels like. Unless, that is, scientific papers on orgasms always end by saying, oh, and go have one. My friends, did you like our readings this week? What did you think? So guess what? This is the fun part now. We're all going to have orgasms. No. The fun part is I'm going to put you in the same position as Mary. Remember my complaint in my article, right? None of us are actually raised from birth in a black and white environment and then suddenly released into the world to see colors for the first time, right? It's not like the Wizard of Oz movie. And so how can we prove what Jackson is saying? Well, let's test it, right? Let's revise what Mary knows, right? What is it like to see red? Here's what Mary knows when it comes to that question. Here's, for instance, roses. The color of roses Now notice what I'm showing on the screen right now. What color is it? So what color is all of this stuff? And my pen's actually really poorly chosen. What color is on the screen right now? What is all this? Sapandeep says black. Yeah, black, black and white, grayscale, right? If you look closely, right, this is not red, right? But hey, it's talking about red. And so if you go here, the color of roses, let me zoom in. This is the kind of stuff that Mary, before her release, could study, right? So here's the color of roses, ruby xanthin and zeaxanthin. Other carotenoids include lutein, lycopene, beta-carotene, taraxanthin, and so she's real smart, right? She knows all this stuff. Roses come in a variety of colors, and different chemical pigments are responsible for the different shades. A large variety of carotenoids above give yellow and orange hues, while a smaller number of anthocyanins below give the more typical reds. So the combinations of compounds from the two classes of pigments give the variety of different shades of these colors. So it says here that a large variety of carotenoids and anthocyanins. So there you go. This is what accounts for it being red. And here you have a molecular structure, and you have cyanin and pelargonin. And if you know your chemistry, and I'm no chemist, but Mary is, Mary knows all this stuff. So Mary's got like 18 PhDs. She's super smart. But when she's studying all this stuff, does she see the color red yet? Yes or no? She's studying these books. Yes or no? Yeah, no red yet, right? So she can, but that's the kind of stuff she can study. And look, that's not nothing. So just to be clear, this is a lot of knowledge that you need to know. Let's look at something else that she can study. She can study the eye. So here's the cross section of the eye. So she can go over to her biology textbook, and she can learn all about. Here's the retina, the choroid, the sclera, the anatomy of the eye, and so on. Again, on the image that I've got right now, do you see any red? Yes or no? No, no red. Agreed. I agree. So, but she can study all this stuff. And certainly, if you're going to see red, you're going to need some eyeballs. And she knows all about eyeballs because she's got 18 PhDs, right? She's super smart. She'll tell you all about it. She's learned all of this. Here's if you zoom in even more, right? So the actual the surfaces, those photoreactive surfaces at the back of the eye, she knows all of this. She's an expert, right? She's really an expert. She's super smart. Here's a rods and cones. So if you've taken some elementary biology, sort of vision biology, here's how we get to detect light and colors. So you've got one thing to detect the intensity and the other for the hues and whatnot. So rods and cones. She knows all this stuff. She could explain it way better than I ever could because I'm just some dumb philosopher, right? And so she's super smart, right? All right, here's this as well, right? Wavelengths in nanometers. So on the left here, you have wavelengths in nanometers, and then you have the absorbed light or corresponding color. So according to this, what is the wavelength of red? So according to this, what's the wavelength of red? 640 nanometers. So there you go. So I bet you didn't know that. The wavelength of red is 640 nanometers. Very interesting. 640, 640, that Tajinder Jayavitesh and Sapandeep wrote in the chat bar. Is that a number or a color that you just typed in the chat bar? Number. Arnav, Sapandeep, could you please type a color in the chat bar? Okay, so what did Sapandeep type in the chat bar? Letters or a color? Letters. What color were the letters that Sapandeep typed? Yeah, black or gray, right? Mary is like you taking an online course, right? And you can imagine she's stuck. It's quarantine from hell, man. Like, think of the thought experiment of the knowledge argument. It's like quarantine on crack. She is from birth lived in quarantine. And her screen, her computer screen has been black and white. When she looks at her hair, it's black and white or grayscale, right? No colors, because you can imagine she's got goggles. Again, make it up, right? Make up whatever you want. That's the idea. And so let me ask you now, does she know what it's like to see red? She hasn't ever been released from quarantine. Does she know what it's like to see red? She's been looking at all the slides we've been looking at her whole life. She knows she's got 18 PhDs. She knows all about the eyeballs. No, there's something you know that she doesn't know. Isn't that comforting, right? Despite her 18 PhDs, right? She knows, we agree that she knows way more than you do in some sense. Do you agree? Type in agree if you agree. Like way more, man. Like I couldn't even begin. Like I'd have to retrain myself from the bottom up to be able to teach you the kind of slides I'm showing you right now. I'm no natural scientist. But do we also agree that you and I know something that she doesn't? There's something we know, right? You and I we know something she doesn't know, right? Yeah. So that's the main idea. All right, so this is a short video. It's 4 minute long, and enjoy it. It's going to say basically the stuff we've just looked at, but in a different way, so it's nice to review.
The knowledge argument is an argument that's supposed to show that physicalism or materialism about mental phenomena is false. Let me just quickly say that whilst physicalism and materialism are sometimes distinguished as slightly different positions, I'm going to think about them in the same way for the purpose of this video, and from now on I'll just speak about physicalism. What then is physicalism about mental phenomena? It's actually surprisingly difficult to say, as it's pretty hard to define what we mean by physical. For our purposes, we'll just understand it as the view that there's nothing immaterial about our mental lives, and that they're all just made up of physical or material stuff. So if you hear someone say your thoughts, feelings, etc. are just firings in the brain and there's nothing more to them than that, then you're very likely speaking to a physicalist. So why does the knowledge argument suggest that physicalism is false? To see why, I'm going to need to tell you some more about Mary. Mary, for one reason or another, has always lived in a black and white room. Yet despite this, Mary is a brilliant scientist. Actually, she's the world expert on the colour red. In fact, Mary is so knowledgeable about red that she knows all the physical facts there are to know about red. And as she exists in the future, where all the physical facts about red have been discovered, she doesn't lack any of them. She knows its wavelength, what happens in our brain when we see red, etc. But there's one strange fact about Mary that I'm yet to tell you. And this is that Mary has never actually seen a red object. Now imagine that someone gives Mary a red object for the first time. Let's say a red mug. The question to ask yourself is this: when Mary gets this red mug and sees red for the first time, does she learn something new? Many philosophers think that it's obvious that she does. She learns what it's like to experience red, what is often called the phenomenal nature of red, or red qualia. But if Mary knew all the physical facts about red to begin with, she must now be learning some non-physical facts about red, since if the fact was physical, she'd have already known it. So because Mary gains an item of knowledge, we must conclude that physicalism about the mental is false, since there are some non-physical aspects about it as well. We can also run versions of this argument that don't involve visual perception. For instance, we can ask the same story about someone who is deaf. Again, this time we have an expert scientist who knows all the physical facts there are to know about hearing, but they don't know what it's like to hear. Now suppose, due to some medical intervention, the scientist does come to hear. The question again will be whether they learn something new, and if in fact they do, then this will be a non-physical fact. Interestingly, due to scientific advancements, there are actually many videos online where people do come to hear for the first time, due to medical interventions. And it seems, having watched some of them, that they do come to learn something new, namely what it's like to hear. Admittedly, these people aren't world experts in hearing, and so do not know all the physical facts about it. But do you think that if they did know all the physical facts, that they wouldn't come to learn something new when they heard sound for the first time? What then do you think of this argument? Is it successful in showing that physicalism about the mental is false, or do you think there are problems with it and ways that physicalists could reply?
Neat. There's a lot of stuff online and I can't always find good stuff, but whenever I can, I share it, right? It's nice to make it interactive and multimedia and whatever, right? As far as an online course goes, I find the format that we're online makes it even more fun for this particular issue, because we're almost kind of like Mary, right? We're like, when I ask you to type in a color, like you couldn't do it, right? Let's do some more stuff now. It's time for you to become Mary. My friends, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to answer in the chat bar. What is it like to taste or smell durian? Who here has eaten durian? Say yes if you have, no if you haven't. So what's your first reflex? If someone asked you something about durian, what would your, in this day and age, what would your reflex be? So if someone asks you this, you don't know what a durian is. Google it. All right, so let's Google it. What the hell is a durian? Someone tell me. Look it up on Google Arnav and tell us what the hell's a durian. Well, so no one's had durian. Well, look, that's a great example then, because we're all like Mary. None of us have ever had this. Okay, so we're exactly in the same position as Mary. Let's learn everything we can about durian. I'm going to read on Wikipedia now. Durian is the edible fruit of several tree species belonging to the genus Durio. There are 30 recognized Durio species, blah, 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 blah. All right. So let's, what about the smell and flavor, which is what I asked. Some people regard the durian as having a pleasantly sweet fragrance, whereas others find the aroma overpowering and unpleasant. The smell evokes reactions of deep appreciation to intense disgust and has been described variously as rotten onions, turpentine, and raw sewage. Rotten onions, turpentine, and raw sewage. What the hell? Let's look at flavor and odor. Here's a quote by the British naturalist Alfred Russel Wallace. He's, by the way, basically the guy who discovered the theory of evolution, like before and independently of Darwin. The 5 cells are silky white within and are filled with a mass of firm, cream-colored pulp containing about 3 seeds each. The pulp is the edible part, and its consistency and flavor are indescribable. That means cannot be described, although he's about to. A rich custard and highly flavored with almonds gives the best general idea of it, but there are occasional wafts of flavor that call to mind cream cheese, onion sauce, sherry wine, and other incongruous dishes. Then there is a rich, gluttonous smoothness in the pulp, which nothing else possesses, but which adds to its delicacy. It is neither acidic nor sweet nor juicy, yet it wants neither of these qualities, for it is in itself perfect. It produces no nausea or other bad effect, and the more you eat of it, the less you feel inclined to stop. Someone here says also, the smell of the ripe fruit is disagreeable. Someone says, smells like rotten onions, but immediately after they've tasted it, they prefer it to other food. And so the odor is best described as pig excrement, turpentine, and onions garnished with a gym stalk. Wow. Okay. Let me stop sharing this screen now. My friends, do these descriptions make any sense to you? Like, did you hear what I just read? Like, what the hell? Like turpentine, onion, almond, creamy, gym stalk. Okay, so do we know what it's like? We've just read some descriptions. Do we really know what it's like to taste or smell durian? Yes or no? So we've started our journey on learning more about durian. Do we really know what it's like to taste or smell durian? Yes or no? We have an idea, right? But go back, yeah, we have an idea. And here's the thing, right? When I say, for instance, that it smells like turpentine, that only makes sense if you know what turpentine smells like. You see that, Arnav? That's kind of like in the reading, the part written by me, right? If I appeal to turpentine, Arnav, do you know what turpentine smells like? So let's just take that example. Everybody else, do you know what turpentine smells like? Say yes or no if you, yes if you do, no if you don't. Turpentine. So Arnav says he knows what turpentine smells like. So that's going to be helpful to you, Arnav, right? But suppose someone else who doesn't know what turpentine smells like. Say no in the chat bar. Do you know turpentine? All right, so Sapandeep doesn't know what turpentine smells like. So Arnav, if I ask you once again, imagine I could replace this, right? What is it like to smell? And again, here you could replace with turpentine. Right? You'd find yourself in exactly the same position. What would you do? You'd use more words and you'd hope that they know what the meaning of those words are, right? You see that or not? Everybody else, you see that? Like there's a regress here because you're using words to describe words, but you got to know what the meaning of the words that you're using to describe it mean. Otherwise, you're still in the same problem. In fact, you're making a problem even worse, right? And obviously, remember also the problem of do these things sum? Do they add up, right? Well, a gym sock plus onions plus turpentine, like what the hell? How does that work out, right? This addition. These aren't quantities, they're qualities. How do you add quality, right? Like for instance, if I ask you red plus red plus red plus red equals what? Type the answer in the chat bar. It just equals red. It doesn't equal more red, right? If I say 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals what? It makes 3. They add. Red plus red plus red. When you add quantities, they add. When you add qualities, it's not clear that you can even add qualities. It doesn't seem to make much sense to say this and that and this and that. All right, so let's begin to learn more about this. So again, let's become like Mary now. Let's get our 18 PhDs in durian. Here's durian. Researchers analyzed compounds from the pulp of durian fruit and found 16 key odor compounds contribute to its unpleasant scent. They also found that only 2 of these, 2S2-methylbutanoate and 1-ethylsulfonyl ethate 1-thiol, were needed to mimic the smell. Okay. I want everyone to do something. Lean over to your screen and smell it. Anybody smelling durian? Say yes or no. No, still no smell, huh? Still no smell. So what have we succeeded in doing? Well, a lot, right? Like, we're stringing together the letters of the alphabet in a way that's very precise, right? That's a major scientific discovery. It's a lot of work. Here's a scientific sort of cross-section of your nose, right? Here's learning, because if we're going to smell and taste durian, we got to know more about, what it means to smell and what it means to taste. You need to learn all of this. If you learn all of this, so you learn more about this, such that you know all about the olfactory nerve, and you could also learn about the tongue. And if you learn all of this as well, here's a scientific paper, Characterization of the Major Odor Active Compounds in Thai Durian by Aroma Extract Dilution Analysis and Headspace Gas Chromatography Olfactometry. And you got to hand it to me that I was able to say that in one go without messing up. Right? Here's the abstract. An aroma extract dilution analysis applied to the volatile fraction isolated from Thai durian by solvent extraction and solvent-assisted flavor evaporation resulted in 44 odor-active compounds of the flavor-diluted FD factor range of 1 to 16,384, 41 of which could be identified, and 24, blah, 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 blah. This is serious stuff, man. You need to be smart AF to understand this kind of stuff. And trust me, I understand philosophy papers. You got to study a lot of PhDs to get that. I don't have the PhDs needed to understand this. Once again, this is a lot of work, and it's really worthwhile. Whoever did this, Joshua Lee, Peter Schieberle, and Martin Steinhaus, folks working on this, these are scientists. This is a big accomplishment. That's amazing. Figuring this out is a huge accomplishment. Learning to understand what the results are themselves is a huge accomplishment. Once again, lean over, lick your screen and smell it. Any taste or smell? Yes or no in the chat bar? Still no. What are we going to do? Okay, well, you know what? Let's learn some more. Let's because we have access to the internet, right? We can do more stuff. Let's have some fun. Here we go, my friends. 2-minute long video. Enjoy this.
I know it smells like ass.
That's about all I know about them, except they smell really bad. Yeah, it's like your freezer when you don't clean it out.
It seems pretty harmless right now. I'm not sure what all the hullabaloo is all about.
Is it soft?
I feel like this is how we're gonna die. Like an alien's gonna pop out.
It's like, no! Does it smell? You smell that?
I can start to smell it.
Oh no!
It's not bad. It kind of smells like a melon.
Oh, it smells like farts now! Oh.
Oh my god.
It smells like wet garbage. Trash, old eggs, cantaloupe, passion fruit, old refrigerator. Oh.
It's like we opened like a dead chicken or something. This looks like mayonnaise and body parts.
It looks kind of pussy. Oh, why'd you have to say that?
So I don't know what part you're supposed to eat.
Ew! I actually don't think that I'm going to be able to eat this. 1, 2, 3. No. There's like a banana and a pineapple.
Melon with the texture of an uncooked egg.
It actually tastes pretty good.
You know, it tastes f***ing terrible. Oh, I just got a weird one. Definitely not worth the work.
It's kind of mean to you when you're trying to eat it.
It does smell good, but then you get like a whiff and it doesn't smell good. And then like
parts of it does taste okay, and then you get a bite that's like not okay.
You can wear a nose plug and have a good time with some durian.
It's like a box of chocolates, but a bad box of chocolates. You don't know what you're gonna get.
My friends, what did you think of this video? And Sapandip writes, we can't feel it until we have not experienced it. That's right. Are we a bit better off? Like what do you think of this video? Like, we learned something. Watching this video was not nothing. Do we agree? Like, watching other humans taste durian is not tasting durian, but it's not nothing. So it's still something, right? Do we agree? Like, when we were watching this video, this is something Mary could have done, by the way. She can look up stuff online, right? Videos as well. She can watch YouTube. She's not like a complete nerd, right? She doesn't have to read scientific papers all day. She can look at YouTube, right? And on YouTube, you'd find people on a black and white YouTube. You'd find people looking at red on a black and white YouTube, right? So what's the equivalent now? So if you think about, we're in the same position as Mary now. When Mary exits her cave or her isolation or whatever quarantine she was in, what would be the equivalent for us to exit that room? How could we escape the room now? As far as durian is concerned, what steps could we take now to encounter this for the first time? How would we exit the room? So we're kind of stuck in the black and white room. That's the equivalent as far as our knowledge of durian is concerned. Because remember, Mary's going to have a ha-ha moment. How could we have a ha-ha moment? What should we do? There's nothing more we can do online. So what can we do? We've kind of done everything we could do, right? We've looked at scientific papers. I mean, we could keep going on and on and on. You got to eat a durian. So you go to your nearest Asian grocery store, right? You go to the TNT. There's a couple in Surrey. There's quite a few in Richmond. You go to TNT and you grab yourself a durian, and then you eat it, and then you pay attention. And then the question is, are you going to learn something when you eat your durian that I couldn't have taught you in this class? Yes or no? And if the answer is yes, right? And I think you all can predict that the answer will be yes. This is a big deal. That means what? It means that the experiential or qualitative aspects of your conscious experiences cannot be captured by language and numbers and diagrams, right? Basically, all of the stuff that science is concerned with. The only way to truly appreciate that quality is to experience it yourself. And that means that there's always going to be a blind spot for science when it comes to studying the nature of the mind, because the mind includes lots of things. It includes your ability to make logical steps, to memorize things. It's got memory. You've got your imagination. There's different components to what a human mind is. But there's an aspect of being a conscious, aware thing. You're alive right now. You're aware. You woke up. You're not sedated. There's something it's like to be us. And there's something it's like to undergo the experiences that we do. And it seems that a purely physical description of all of that, of the sort that we looked at here, and of the sort that we looked at when we looked at all of these molecules and all this stuff, doesn't capture the qualia of our experiences. And qualia is the technical term precisely for that residue that escapes science.